May 5th, 2014. Harmonix Music Systems launches a Kickstarter. It's for a game called Amplitude, an HD reimagining of one of their very first titles. Welcome to Rhythm Research. As we build up towards the launch of Hypergroove AX, coming soon for Panic's Playdate, we'll be digging into formative rhythm game franchises. Make sure to watch to the end of each video, as sneak peeks of Hypergroove AX will be dropped throughout. Before Guitar Hero. Before Rock Band. Harmonix created a whole subgenre of beat-matching rhythm games that played a key role in the inspiration of Hypergroove AX. It's time to talk FreQuency, Amplitude, and beyond. FreQuency, 2001. November 20th, 2001. A little over a year after the release of the PlayStation 2, Sony Computer Entertainment released a rhythm game unlike anything else on the market, from an unknown developer based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. Harmonix Music Systems had actually been around for about 6 years at this point, but their first product, the Axe, failed to make a dent commercially. The company spent some time trying to evaluate their next moves. The result of this journey? That was FreQuency. FreQuency combines the beat-matching gameplay of a title like Dance Dance Revolution or Poppin' Music with the idea of quote-unquote building a song. Players control a freak, the cue, aiming to hit all the notes in a two-measure sequence to quote-unquote capture a track and then switch to another. As tracks remain captured, the song builds until you can hear the full thing. This resets at checkpoints throughout the song. Players aim to earn the highest score possible by successfully hitting all the notes on the track, quickly switching to another track, and continuing their note streaks. Players are aided by power-ups, such as one that clears the remaining notes of a track, automatically capturing it and letting them switch to another one. This can allow for players to take out harder note sequences and focus on tracks they're better equipped to handle. The sequence players need to hit before switching it is represented both with a highlighted track and a thread connecting the notes. Performance is rated out of 3 bars. Getting a high enough total score in an area unlocks a bonus song, encouraging players to replay music until they master it. There are 27 songs in the game total, mostly electronic in nature. Of the artists on the soundtrack, many are lesser known, with a remix of No Doubt's Ex-Girlfriend probably being the most well-known song on the disc. There's an interesting mix of bands like Fear Factory, The Crystal Method, and Harmonix in-house originals rounding it out. Players could also remix songs, changing features like swapping out melodies and BPM, and then play through them. It's a cool little feature, and in my opinion, it set the groundwork for things like GH Tunes in Guitar Hero or Rock Band Network in Rock Band, not to mention the gameplay of future Harmonix titles like Drop Mix Diffuser. The game also had a multiplayer mode, allowing multiple players to play through the song simultaneously, competing for the highest score. In a weird twist, and the kind of thing you just never would see today, a demo disc could be swapped out post-launch that had online multiplayer capabilities. Swapping the demo disc out with the full disc after opening the game allowed the full game soundtrack to be played online as well. FreQuency had a really simple but really cool art direction. There's a lot of solid neon colors, and the octagonal space in which players beat match is pretty trippy and pretty abstract. The note gems feel a little out of place visually, but overall I'm actually really impressed with how well the game's look has aged. The note timing is a little stricter than I'd like though, and it's sometimes hard to keep a note combo going when switching tracks, though ultimately it doesn't harm the experience too much. The game is still a blast to play. Upon its release, FreQuency received pretty positive reviews, but commercially, it didn't really make an impact. In spite of all that though, Harmonix would get a chance to iterate on the formula. Amplitude, 2003. 2 years later, on March 25th, 2003, a sequel called Amplitude was released. Players once again control a freak, whom they can customize, but in the actual beat-matching gameplay, said freak is controlling a quote-unquote beat blaster. Imagine a sort of sci-fi looking ship, and that's basically what you get. The game has more power-ups than frequency. Now you can slow time down, making tricky sections easier to match. You can freestyle sections, which remove the beat matching altogether for a short time, letting you score points by moving your ship and hitting different buttons. The soundtrack is more varied and more mainstream than frequency too, bringing in artists like David Bowie, Blink-182, Papa Roach, Pink, and everyone's favorite, P.O.D. into the fold. Original songs, most notably synthesized by Symbian Project, also round out the setlist of 26 songs. Gameplay is fairly similar to Frequency, but the presentation is different. There's a lot more texture in this game, and I mean that in a literal sense. Frequency used a lot more solid colors in its UI and 3D objects. Amplitude looks like that classic, hella textured PS2 game. I personally prefer the look of Frequency, or at least I think it's aged better than Amplitude's, but Amplitude still looks fine in comparison to other games of the era. Instead of an all-enclosing tunnel of note tracks, Amplitude lays out its different tracks for a song for you. In an improvement from Frequency, the game also has arrows pointing at which tracks and notes you need to switch to/hit to keep your multiplier going. Remix and multiplayer also return. Multiplayer is buffed up with additional modes, primarily a head-to-head mode, where players engage in a sort of alternating Simon Says call and response gameplay. And there's a multiplayer version of the remix mode now too. Amplitude would, once again, be critically well received, but go largely unnoticed commercially. A cult following would develop over the years though, and Harmonix would find ways to keep their unique spin on beat matching gameplay alive. Rock Band Unplugged, 2009. 6 years later, the PlayStation Portable would be graced with a spin-off to Harmonix's popular Rock Band franchise. Rock Band Unplugged combines the track-building gameplay of Amplitude with the character creation, world tour, and rock and roll focus of the Rock Band franchise. The game is pretty solid, but the controls are honestly less than ideal. This is largely due to the limited input options of the PSP and the increase in note gems for any given track. If the game had stayed with the 3 note gems of Amplitude and Frequency, it may have felt better to play, but with 4 buttons there are a lot of awkward 2 and 3 button combinations that have to be hit on expert. The default control scheme assigns the 2 left notes to the D-pad and the 2 right notes to the face buttons of the TSP, with the cross button being used for overdrive activation and the shoulder buttons being used for track switching. Hitting 2 notes on the same side is awkward because you kind of have to reposition your fingers in a weird way to do so, or like kind of twist your thumb in a weird way. But if you can adjust to that, it's a fun game, and much like its older console brethren, it had a, admittedly short, series of post-launch songs released as paid DLC. The Rock Band Unplugged formula would be applied to LEGO Rock Band and Rock Band 3 for the Nintendo DS. However, no DLC would be released for either game. Of course, this wasn't actually the end of Rock Band dabbling in the track building and switching approach of Frequency and Amplitude. A few years later, we'd see yet another iteration. Rock Band Blitz, 2012. What a neat little birthday present. Released in August 2012, Rock Band Blitz was a digital download for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 that let players use their Rock Band library, in addition to a 25-song soundtrack, to play through a variant of the classic Frequency and Amplitude formula. There are some key differences here right out of the gate though. Most notable, there are only 2 buttons for each track. This makes for a much easier beat matching experience than Rock Band Unplugged or even Amplitude. Rock Band Blitz also doesn't have a fail state. This is purely about score chasing. Beat matching, while still important, is actually slightly de-emphasized to encourage jumping between tracks while maintaining a combo. This happens in a couple of ways. First, your score multiplier builds throughout the song as you successfully hit sections of notes. You don't drop from a 4 times multiplier to a 1 times multiplier for missing a note. You gain multiplier by simply completing a section of notes. However, your multiplier is capped for each part of the song, only increasing relative to your lowest multiplier in each part. So if you get guitar, keys, drums, and bass up to 4x in the first part of the song, but don't touch vocals, you're going to be stuck at a 4 times multiplier for the next part of the song. If you get up to a 2x multiplier, then you can raise everything to 5x. So there's a give and take between tracks. If you want to max out your score, you need to make sure you're fully increasing the multiplier for each instrument in each part of the song. There is also a bonus for hitting notes in succession. Continuing to do so lets you enter blitz mode, which pulls the camera closer in, increases the speed of the track, and grants a scoring bonus. You can miss a few notes while in blitz mode before you leave it too. So if you keep playing perfectly, you'll stay in blitz mode, but you don't immediately lose it just because you've broken a combo. The traditional Rock Band overdrive is replaced by something closer to Amplitude's power-ups. You can get a 2x multiplier power-up, a note-clearing power-up that grants you points as it does so, a power-up for letting the computer play another track for you simultaneously, etc. There's just one problem. Unlocking these power-ups and using them is tied to earning cred. And earning cred required you to connect to a Facebook app. A Facebook app that, surprise, is no longer active. So while most of the footage in this video is freshly recorded by me, I couldn't use any power-ups because I had to re-download Blitz, and the app is long gone, no longer available for sale. So while the game is still playable, it's a seriously neutered experience. Rock Band Blitz feels great to play, but it's hard to go back to now given how core parts of the gameplay loop are entirely shut down and inaccessible. But back in the day, it was so much fun challenging friends through the Rock Band World Facebook app, collecting cred, unlocking new power-ups, and letting the cycle continue. There was always a small contingency of players looking for a Rock Band Blitz 2, and sadly, that would never happen. However, Harmonix would return to their original formula one last time, and this time they do so with a little help from their friends. I mean fans. Amplitude 2016. In May of 2014, the original hypergroup, my senior thesis at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, was finished. I received an A, and somehow I won an academic award for it. Yes, we are doing the little humble brag section. That same month, Harmonix took to Kickstarter for their next project, a reimagining of Amplitude. The aim was to have it out in May 2015. Its first backer? Yours truly. Amplitude barely made it across the crowdfunding finish line, with just about 24 hours left before it hit its funding goal, though it would surpass said goal by nearly 100,000 within the last day. This was in a time where Kickstarters from known developers seemed to get funded within days of their launch. Was it because of the inherently tricky nature of this style of rhythm game? I think that's really abstract and kind of hard to quickly pitch to players, but once they get it, just kind of clicks? I mean, probably, but I don't really have a good answer for that. Amplitude wouldn't actually end up releasing until early 2016 on PlayStation 4, with a PlayStation 3 version releasing shortly afterwards. Kickstarter backers would actually get the PS4 version in late 2015. As has become custom for these videos, before we go any further, I'm not an unbiased actor here. Not only was I the first person to back this game on Kickstarter, I ultimately ended up working on it, helping with some community management and Kickstarter support around the launch of the game. The game though, it's Amplitude. It has a more modern art style that I think looks great, and the beat matching also feels fantastic. There's a fun little freak mode, yes, it's called freak mode, that lets players play the game with a tunnel layout similar to FreQuency 2. The soundtrack is mostly original music composed for the game, with the single-player campaign being conceived as a concept album. 15 of the game's 30 tracks appear here, including Recession, which was also featured on the Rock Band 4 setlist. The quality of the soundtrack is solid, but while songs like Recession or Decode Me stick in my head to this day, there are honestly a fair few that are forgettable. The other 15 songs are bonus tracks, many of which were from Kickstarter backers or as stretch goals from the crowdfunding campaign. This includes a new version of Synthesized from the original Amplitude, music from indie games like Skullgirls and Transistors. Notably absent, despite promises of the Kickstarter, is chiptune favorite Anamanaguchi, but the songs that are there are fun additions. There's nothing quite like playing Amplitude to Cryptech from Crypt of the Necrodancer. The game has multiplayer, but it's local only. There's no remix mode. This is, I think, what disappointed some fans and critics. This is a smaller scale project than its PS2 predecessor. The game that's there, it's incredibly well made, and it so clearly had so much love poured into it. But it's slimmer, and it doesn't have big names like David Bowie or Blink-182. And yeah, the game didn't have much of a life beyond launch. There was no DLC, there were no major updates with new features. It was a largely one and done affair. And I mean, it's unlikely Harmonix will ever return to the series, as the rights lie with Sony, and Harmonix is owned by Epic and in the Fortnite mill now. See my last video for my thoughts on that. So, is there a future for this type of game? You best believe it. Earlier this year, an indie game called Beat Weaver was revealed, taking clear inspiration from Amplitude and adding in a fourth button and new gameplay mechanics. I'm super excited to get my hands on the game when it's done. Here's what I can tell you though. The future of this type of music game in particular is going to be paved by indies. A large studio isn't going to make a weird, abstract beat matching game that players have to actually get their hands on to understand. But Amplitude and FreQuency have inspired plenty of people, and I believe there's different ways to remix the idea that Harmonix brought to the table. Beat Weaver builds upon the core concept of those games. Hypergroove takes inspiration from it and fuses it with something else altogether. Hey, maybe I should actually, I don't know, explain what Hypergroove AX is, huh? Would that be a good idea? An earlier version of this YouTube channel did cover it, but that video is no longer available, so Hypergroove and Hypergroove AX. Okay, so I mentioned the original Hypergroove. I built this game as a senior thesis or major qualifying project back in college. It was, first and foremost, an engineering project more than a game design one. I knew I wanted to make a rhythm game, and for a variety of reasons, I wanted to do it independently of other students. I would have assistance on the art and audio, but this would be from students at other colleges. I built a very basic game engine in C++ leveraging Fmod and Juice for audio, Lua integration for data management, high scores, song information, the like, and SDL for graphics and input. I wanted the game to stand out though, so it took on an early Adult Swim meets glitch art aesthetic, and instead of simply beat matching one melody, players would find themselves switching back and forth between two parts of a song. There would be more flexibility than Amplitude, and largely due to scope, there was no multi-track element, so audio didn't fade in or out based on your actions. The game took a more Bemani-esque appearance too, with a 2D vertical scrolling note highway rather than the three-dimensional note highways Harmonix is famous for. Its development was extremely rough, and it was held together by strings, but the game was playable and, frankly, a great learning experience from the tech angle. I often very publicly noted a desire to make a follow-up, even building and, for a variety of complicated reasons, scrapping multiple prototypes, culminating in a more traditional music game called Chroma Chord. Chroma Chord was axed after joining Harmonix and realizing there was going to be a lot of overlap from my asynchronous multiplayer ideas and what was in early ideation for Rock Band 4 Rivals. That was late 2015. In mid-2024, and after getting a Playdate, I wanted to make something for it. I realized that Hypergroove would be a good fit. The crank could be used as a mechanism for switching between tracks, and I had been wanting to build my own rhythm game again anyways. And so, Hypergroove Anniversary X was born. I worked on it in my spare time and eventually renamed it to simply Hypergroove AX. The name a nod to the original, while also sounding like a Dance Dance Revolution sequel, embodying that Bemani spirit. Development would be stalled for a bit after a serious accident that I had in early 2025, but it would resume in earnest once I began recovering. The game was finished at the end of last year, and 2 rounds of playtesting were conducted prior to the game's submission to Panic. Much like the Amplitude reboot, this game's scope is pretty small. Songs are short, they're similar to DDR versions for the original Game Boy, where you're getting like a minute or so of music. There's also only 9 songs at launch, though I do plan to add more songs post-release. And it's simply about getting a high score on the leaderboards. A lot of passion, a lot of love has gone into this, and I've had to work through a lot of technical issues and limitations with the Playdate hardware itself. Honestly, a lot of the final 6 months of development prior to this first submission to Panic, they were just focused on optimization and game feel. So I really hope you like it when it releases, and keep your eyes out for a launch trailer when I have more to share. Because yeah, I had hoped, when making these videos, to have a firmer release date to reveal here at the end. Hell, I'm even re-recording this video to provide more recent info, but I don't. Upon submitting to the Playdate catalog, Panic's official Playdate storefront, the game was rejected. It took a while to get actionable feedback, more time than I'd like to be honest, and it took some time to address said feedback. I resubmitted the game to Panic, and while I'm thrilled to announce that Hypergroove AX has been approved for release on the Playdate catalog, I'm still waiting to be onboarded to Panic's developer portal. When I have more info to share about a release date, I'll be sure to let you know. Until then, thank you so much for tuning into Rhythm Research. This has been a very interesting exercise in going through different game franchises that have inspired my own work and reflecting on what I did or did not like about them. I also hope you'll give me a follow on Blue Sky and follow Coho Coco Designworks, my game studio, on both Blue Sky and Instagram. You'll get all the latest Hypergroove news there, including potentially releases of singles on streaming services and Bandcamp, as well as, of course, the release date for the game. And it wouldn't be a YouTube video if I didn't say it. Be sure to like the video, comment, and subscribe. Oh my god, am I gonna have to do a third re-record of this video? Like, seriously? Oh, hi. So yeah, earlier in the video, if you're watching this far, you may have noticed that I mentioned that while Hypergroove AX has been accepted for release on Panic's Playdate, I didn't have any more information I could share. No release window, I didn't have access to their developer portal, etc., etc. Well, as I finished up the final segment of the video, I actually got an email from Panic. And there's new information. That is, Hypergroove is coming out this October. I do have a more specific release date. I'm just not sharing it here today because I obviously want to firm some things up on my end before I commit to that. But yeah, this October, exclusively for Panic's Playdate, Hypergroove AX. Stay tuned for more details.